Hello and welcome to Brain Soup, a channel where I chat about whatever may be simmering away in my neurodivergent little mind. So, what are we serving up today? That will be the story of how the pandemic made me realize I have ADHD. ADHD is a neurological condition that impacts the parts of the brain that are involved in the regulation of attention, emotion, and executive functioning. For example, sustained attention, planning, motivation, working memory, a sense of time, organization, and so on. There are 3 presentations: inattentive, hyperactive, or combined. In another video, I'll delve more into compensation strategies that had gotten me to where I was, and a bit more about why those weren't enough anymore. So when I think back a few years ago, at the start of COVID, the lockdowns impacted lots of people in many different ways. A lot of people were scared and lonely and trying to keep themselves busy in some sort of way. And people started reaching out more on social media to keep some kind of connection going with their friends, with their community. And people would just talk about what they were up to, things they'd found interesting, new hobbies that they were trying out now that they had the time. And also, for a few people, being a bit more openly vulnerable and sharing some of their struggles and their challenges. I had a few friends that started posting some information about ADHD. There was an infographic here, a comic there. I would look at them and I would read them and I'd say, that's a little interesting. I was doing quite well, actually, during the pandemic. My job, thankfully, was an office position, and the company pivoted very quickly to having people work remotely. And having my own dedicated space at home where I had a lot more control over my environment and a lot more control over interruptions as well. People approaching desks turned into sending a message over a chat application, and I could take a minute to finish my thought before switching. I also had written records of discussions and any action items that I might have to do. That was working really well for me. So even though I'd had a bit more exposure to what ADHD might be, different ways that ADHD might present, I didn't think too much of it at the time. But a little bit later, circumstances changed. My daughter was in play school and becoming more independent, more social, and I was not able to match her energy levels. It's getting a little older, and I was having to get up earlier to go to work and deal with traffic noises and planning for travel times. And what are the bus routes again? And did they change their route? Did they change the times? Getting back to a very open office concept where plexiglass cubicle wall extensions were installed as part of COVID precautions for people who for whatever reason, were unable to work at home. And between getting a bit older, having a more active child who was able to run a little faster, it was harder to keep up with. And really just being quite frustrated with going back to a working model that we had already proven was not necessary. My team worked great from home. We got our work done, we collaborated well, and going back to the office, I was always thinking, how was this accepted as the norm? Why are we traveling to a central location when we're able to connect and everything we need to connect is 5 steps? I had to get up an hour and a half earlier. Had to always make sure to plan what my meal would be, plan my outfit. It was a lot more work, and it was a lot more effort than I remembered my job used to be before working at home, before I had really the accommodation of working at home. So I was struggling. I was struggling with work. I was struggling at home too. I would be off with the fairies, as it were. I would be distracted. I would be sitting just zoned out and come back to myself and not even know how long I'd been sitting like that. I would forget about things I had to do. And I was so tired that by the time I got home and had spent time with my family and done whatever other household things needed to get done, there was nothing left, and I was exhausted and knew that something needed to change. And so I went back, I thought about the ADHD-Alien that my friends had shared online, the different ways that hyperactivity or inattention can manifest. It's not always bouncing off the walls. It can be losing your thoughts and fidgeting in order to finish a thought. It could be interrupting people to finish their sentences or answer a question they hadn't finished asking. So I looked at some more of those comics. I started watching some ADHD content creators on YouTube. And the more I read, the more I watched, the more things were resonating. One advantage, if you want to call it that, of the hyperactive type is those symptoms are a lot more noticeable. And people are more motivated to get a child assessed when their hyperactivity, it's a problem for other people. Inattentive, if your mind is just off with fairies, you're a little bit more shy, a little bit more quiet. You're not making your attention anyone else's problem. It's only a problem for me. But it can be a big problem. I would forget to do things. I would lose things around the house. I would put something down to be able to do something and not be able to find it later. A lot of the time, I'd have to wander around for ages to be able to find it again because once I set it down, it might as well not even exist anymore. And so since I was struggling a bit more, I found online a screening questionnaire that is often used to help adults get assessed for ADHD. I was reading these questions like, when you're in a conversation, how often do you find yourself finishing the sentences of the people you're talking to before they can finish it themselves? How often do you have problems remembering appointments or obligations? Well, I tell you, if I didn't have a calendar in my phone, 100% of the time I would forget. When you have a task that requires a lot of thought, how often do you avoid or delay getting started? A lot more often than I would like to admit. So I went to my doctor, told him my concerns and that I had a suspicion. So he gave me a clipboard with that same questionnaire I'd been looking at, filled it out. He said, yep, you have ADHD. And that's that. So I was 39 years old. But at the end of the day, I had a better understanding of myself. And I could find a lot more resources that helped me understand why I was finding certain things so hard. And ideas and suggestions that made a world of difference. So for everybody who opened their hearts and shared their struggles and post content, thank you so much. I'm so glad that I know this. I'm so glad that I know more about ADHD and how it impacts my life. So thanks. Thank you so much for watching. Take care of yourself. We'll talk soon.